Reddit. The place where you can find loads of things that you never knew you needed to know until you know it. You know what I'm saying? You just stumble upon something like elephants have actual 3 ears. And the third one just happens to not be shown. I didn't know that. Did you know that? No, because it's not true. I just made that up on the spot. But see, you probably Reddited it. You probably checked on Reddit because Reddit just has some useless information sometimes. But they also have some pretty amazing stories. And by stories, I'm talking about true, scary horror stories. Alright, today we are gonna be checking out 5 Reddit true horror stories that happened to people just like you and I. Okay, they was living their normal life, doing their thing, when something traumatic happened. I don't know what it is. But we gonna find out what traumatized these people so deeply. Starting off with number 1. Smashing that subscribe button. Okay, y'all thought we were gonna get into it. Y'all thought it? Nah, smash that subscribe button, guys. Come on, stop playing with me, okay? Leave a like if you enjoyed today's video. If you get scared, that is. Leave a like, okay? Even if you don't get scared, you don't have to not like it. You could also like it. Like, it mean a lot to me if you liked it. But if you get scared, leave a super like. Okay, super smash that like button. Take both your hands like this and boom, like you a hug. You know what I'm saying? Clobbering time. You know what I'm saying? Hit that like button, smash it. And also leave a comment down below what you want to see next. Cause it's the boy kotu and y'all know we the best. Stop playing with us. Okay, stop playing. Y'all be playing with us. And you need to stop because it's the boy kotu and y'all know we the best. Stop playing with us. Now with all that said, let's go chit chat, bit back, read tic tac, and let's get into these Reddit true scary horror stories. Story number 1. The boy who traumatized me. A lot of weird things have happened in my life, to be honest. I have met a lot of strange people, and here's a story involving some of those. I will start by saying that I don't remember a lot of what I'm about to tell you because I was only about 4 to 5 years old when it all went down. But my parents have filled in the gaps. My mother knew a lot about the family I'm about to tell you about, so she's told me a lot. Let's get into it. Why did my accent to it? Get into it. Let's get into it. Let's get into whatever. When I was just a mere child at the age of 4, my mom and dad were friends with a married couple. I do remember that the woman had the same name as my mother, Charlotte. I feel like that's a very British name, Charlotte, or maybe Bridget. That's a British name too, Bridget. Anything that ends with it, Juliet. That's a pretty British name there. And same name as my mother, which I thought was pretty funny back then. The couple had 2 children, a boy the same age as me, and a girl around the same age as my older sister. Naturally, that resulted in our parents deciding that the boy and I were gonna be besties, whether we wanted it or not. My sister actually got along very well with their daughter, and they became good friends. For me, however, it was a different story. Different story, that's... Alright. This boy scared me. The only things I really remember of him was him breaking my toys every time they were at our place. Breaking my toys, huh? You want to fight, mate? You don't know what I'm about to do to you, mate. He would rip the limbs of my Barbies. Jesus, ripping the limbs. That's an early sign of serial killerism, if that's a word. He would rip the limbs off my Barbies, and take out the fillings of my plushies. You just didn't like things. You just want to murder everything. Jesus. I was always in tears, picking up the pieces of my broken toys after they had left our house. I don't remember what my parents ever said or did about it. I only remember feeling dismissed when I told them about it, and they kept forcing me to invite him to my room every time they came to visit. I also remember lending him my favorite My Little Pony movie I had on VHS. For you young ones over there watching behind your screens, do you remember VCS? VHS? VHS? Do you remember that? The one with the cassette player? You don't even know what a cassette player is? Oh golly me. I was so sad about it, but my parents didn't seem to care much, and eventually they just forgot about me ever having let him borrow the movie. Parents, so forgetful. My mother would usually sit in the kitchen with the boy's mother and talk, and they never wanted me around. I couldn't seek comfort. The woman would even laugh at me and say to my mom right in front of me, "What? What a weird daughter you have." And my mom wouldn't even defend me. That's a moment I will never forget, because that's the first of many times in my life I was bullied. That woman was probably the reason why her son was so violent and acting out all the time. Parents have told me in later years that she was an absolute psycho in their opinion. You thought she was a psycho, but you laughed at me when I needed your comfort. So you knew she was a psychopath. I went straight. You knew she was a psycho and you laughed at me. You just laughed. Wow. She scared her son all the time and was really mean to him. For example, she liked to joke about putting him in the oven and cooked him for dinner. She even said, "I will raise the temperature so you'll die quickly," and laughed at him while he cried in horror. I don't know about you. I think you like to eat cannibalisms. Why my mom wanted to spend so much time with her, I will never understand. But my mother has always had a tendency to make friends that like to manipulate and control her to the point she's too scared of them to even defend herself or her own kids against them. It happens more than once over the years. I will never forget that pit in my stomach that appeared every time I heard the doorbell ring and that boy came rushing in ready to make my day a living hell. One time he had brought a doctor's kit that had gotten from his parents. Imagine the dread spreading through my body as he gave me a big smile and said, "We're gonna play doctor today. You'll be the patient." I think that was the first time in my life I literally thought I was gonna die. I realized now that he couldn't possibly have killed me with a bunch of plastic toys, but back then I was terrified. In my head I was certain he was going to do something to me as he had done to my poor toys. He asked me to lay down on my bed. As he opened the kit, my heart was racing, but to my surprise he was actually gentle. For once he acted like another kid, pretending to listen to my heartbeats, took my temperature, and gave me flu shots, etc. That was the only time I remember not having anything to cry about after they had left. Oh, so cutesy. Trigger warning, skip this next paragraph if you're sensitive to animal abuse. Animal abuse? What? Then we have the animals. Those of you who are interested in true crime will know that most serial killers start with animals. This kid was as close to psychopath as you get without actually turning into a serial killer, as far as I know of. Mom told me about all these things because this is all stuff I either never knew about or didn't remember. The family had a cat, and none of them had seen it for a few days. It was an outdoor cat, so it wasn't that uncommon that it was out for a few days or two, but they were starting to worry. The mother asked the boy if he had seen the cat. He said no. It took around 2 weeks before one of the parents went out to the shed they had in their backyard. There they found the cat starved to death. It turned out that the boy had actually locked the cat in there on purpose and pretended he had no idea where it was. Are you crazy? You're not gonna feed your cat because why? Because it meows and it gives you love and affection? You crazy boy, you. Another time was when he was at our place. My mother had some newly hatched chickens and ducklings. So chickens and ducklings in the basement from eggs she had incubated herself down there. The boy and I had asked if we were allowed to go down there and look at them. She gave us permission. After we had been down there for a while, she went downstairs to check on us. When she came down the stairs, she gasped in horror as she saw the boy standing there, throwing the fragile little chickens against the concrete floor. You're killing chickens on the concrete floor? This boy needs to go to prison. Attempting to hit the water ball as if they were nothing but toys. She never let him near any of our pets again. I'm sure there were more incidents involving animals, but these are the incidents I remember having been told about. That kid is an actual psychopath. You're telling me he was like this with the chicken? He was like, "Yeah, touchdown!" No, no. Now that I think and hope was the last straw for my parents, the boy and I were outside on a hot summer day, playing in the backyard. Our parents had a pleasant conversation further away. This is one of those things I don't remember at all, so I'm going off what my parents have told me. The boy had gone investigating and found a pair of hedge cutters. Not the electric ones, but the classic ones that look like giant scissors. He sneaked up behind me, and my focus was on something else entirely, so I didn't notice him at all. His father looked away just as the boy had placed the cutters on each side of my neck, ready to cut. His father screamed, "Stop!" and ran towards us, literally kicking his son to the ground to save me. I don't think I ever grasped what had happened at all. Oh my days! After this, the boy and his father spent an hour and a half inside a little playhouse we had. That's how long it took for the boy to utter out the words, "I'm sorry," because he refused to see that trying to cut someone's head off with edges is wrong. Like I said, I hope this was my parents' last straw. I don't remember if the family visited us again with that incident, since I don't even remember the incident myself. All I remember is the relief of eventually never having to see that kid again. I'm pretty sure he's part of why I became a victim of bullying for years to come, thanks to being afraid of everyone around me and acting weird around people. As far as I know, he's living a normal life today, with a girlfriend around 30 minutes from where I live. Why do you know that? Why do you know that? How do you even know that? You say he almost killed you, all these things, and you know about his relationship life? What's going on now? My mom has seen him a few times over the years and says he's become such a quiet and charming young man. Charming! She thinks I should meet him someday to see that he's not like he was back then, and maybe that would help me get over the trauma he caused. I just told her no thanks. I don't feel like becoming his first murder victim. I hope I never see him again. But for some reason you know exactly where his girlfriend lives. Story number 2. True EMS horror story. I worked as a dispatcher for a pretty small ambulance station near a fairly large city in the middle of the US. I don't know how specific I can be since this is a true story. And I'm going to tell one of the craziest stories I have from this job. We had a patient who we will call Susan. She was a dialysis. How do you even say that? What's that? What? Dialysis patient. Dialysis. She was a dia patient. And one of the services we offered was taking very unwell or disabled patients to and from these dia appointments. She lived with her son, who we will call David. He was in his late 40s, and his mother Susan in her late 70s or so. Every week, like clockwork, we would have a unit bring Susan to and from diet treatments 3 times a week. Everyone knew her at the station because we had been doing this for quite some time with Susan. We were all familiar with her and her son, whether it was the crew seeing her in person and taking care of her, or speaking to her or her son on the phone frequently about appointments, as I had done. Everyone knew her. Naturally, when crews had news about her health, they would report back to keep everyone in the loop with how she was. At one point, she was not feeling well at all. But she wanted to go to her diet appointment, so naturally we obliged and took her in. At this appointment, while receiving diet treatment, she lost consciousness and was promptly taken by our crew to the hospital. When it was time for her diet appointment, we gave the hospital a call to see if she had been released and was able to go to the appointment. The hospital staff informed us that she would likely be released by the following day and would be receiving the diet treatment in the hospital. Then the next treatment time rolled around, and we called the hospital and we were told she had been released from their care the other day. This was great news, but a little strange due to the fact that we were always her first call to transport her or from any hospital or appointment, and we hadn't transported her anywhere. We quickly moved on, however, called David, her son, to see if she was going to be requiring us for her treatment that day. He informed us she wasn't feeling well and that she wasn't up to it, but that he was considering taking her back into the hospital. We tell him if he needs us to give us a call, and until further notice, we cancel our trip for the day. We never get a call. Next appointment rolls around. What is happening? What are you doing, David? And we call David again to ask if she will be going. He says she's sick and she's going back to the hospital. Weird, again, since we hadn't taken her, but doesn't seem that off considering her health, and her health had been deteriorating. Next appointment. How many appointments, goddammit? Same thing happens. We call David. His mom's in the hospital. We move on. Now is where things took a bit of a turn. When the next appointment came up, we had tried calling David to ask about his mother's status, but he never answered or returned our calls. So being that we had a contract with Susan, we were to take her to these appointments unless told otherwise. We sent a crew to collect her for treatment. When the crew arrived at the scene, they knocked on the door to no response. They knocked again and were greeted by David smoking a cigarette. David seeming surprised. The crew said they were there to pick up Susan for her appointment. David responded stating he had forgotten to call, but Susan was still in the hospital, not doing well. She's dead. Susan's just not alive. Susan has passed away. The crew gave their best wishes and David shut the door, but the crew felt like something was off. They immediately radioed to dispatch that something was wrong and they requested we call the hospital. David said she was at to see if she was still there. The hospital had no record of her being there since we last knew. So we had the crew leave the scene and we called for a welfare check on Susan at her son's home. We heard nothing the rest of the day from the police, David, Susan, or anyone else involved. The next morning I came into work and the very first call I took began, "This is Sheriff with I'm calling to report back on the welfare check you asked us to perform yesterday." I was nervous as he sounded concerned and I didn't really expect them to call us back with any news. He proceeded to let me know that upon arrival to the home, they spoke to David, who was adamant his mother didn't feel well, but that she was home from the hospital. The police asked to check on Susan to make sure she was alright, and eventually David obliged, letting the police in. Once entering the home, they were met with the grime scene, though I imagine they smelled it first. Yeah, see, I told you she's dead. They continued to explain that the officers observed was the dead body of Susan propped up on the couch, wrapped in blankets, as if watching the television, but she had been dead for a while. They approximated around 2 weeks. When speaking to David, they found that he had been changing her clothes regularly and watching TV with her. Obviously, he was suffering from some sort of mental issue and grief, but the thing was, he had never taken good care of her until she was dead. So yeah, you mean to tell me she was alive, you was like, too much work to take care of you. She dies, you're like, yo, I gotta bathe you, I'm gonna change your clothes for you, make sure you good, you straight, mom. She's straight up in heaven, that's what she doing. Story number 3. Saw something like Slenderman in the woods. Before I start with my true story, actually hold on, I need a different accent for this one. Before I start with my true story, I apologize for any following spelling or grammar mistakes. English is not my first language. Also, sorry if the story is messy. I'm not a professional writer. Okay, I'm posting this here because I have never experienced something like this and would like to hear a few opinions, or maybe the story won't even reach people. This happened yesterday, 27th October. So it was around 4:50 p.m. The sun began setting, but it was still bright outside when my sister and me went into the woods to... The woods are basically down our street, and we went specifically is maybe a 6-7 minute long walk. We made our way to a spot where we've multiple times before, a small bench in said woods, approximately like 3 minutes away from the road that passes through the woods. The bench is on the beginning of a relative wide trail. I often see people walking their dogs there and pooping and peeing and pooping and nya. We got there, our joint, and everything was normal. When we were done with smoking it, it was almost completely dark, but we were still able to make out the trees, etc. We were standing in front of the bench, and I was like standing sideways, so I was facing the trail. Hope this makes sense. And my sister was facing me with her back to the trail. Then suddenly I noticed something, maybe like 5 meters from us, down the trail in between the trees, next to something weird. I stayed like 40 seconds behind my sister to make sure I wasn't just seeing things, and try to analyze what I was seeing. The first thing I noticed was a white round something that looked like a head but with no face. Under the head I saw the black seahawk, or something long and slim next to a tree. My first thought was, this looks like Slenderman. Hey, you look like Slenderman, you, hey? And what weirded me out was that no matter how I moved my head and body to kind of look behind the trees, I always saw the white round thing. I stared and stared and told myself I'm just imagining things. But the thing is, when I first saw whatever was standing there, the feeling of fear came over me. I did not want to look at any longer. And said to my sister, is someone standing there? And my sister turned around for 2 seconds before quickly turning back. And she said, no. Then I said to her in a half-jokingly tone, because I didn't know how she reacted, there's something that looked like Slenderman. Without looking behind her again, She looked me in the eyes and said, that next to the tree, I saw it too. I saw it too. And I was never scared like this in my entire life. I began to run and said to her, run. We ran. He said to us, why are you running? And we said, we are running because of you. Anyways, we ran out of the woods. On the way out, something fell out of my purse and my sister ran back to pick it up. You're going back to the Slenderman and you're picking crazy. I looked over my shoulder and yelled that it does not matter and to keep running. It was just a makeup sponge and lip gloss. So nothing important anyways. When we were back at the street, trying to catch our breath, my sister told me that when she turned around because I asked if someone was standing there, she thought I meant if a person was standing on the normal trail, and she said no because that was obviously not the case. However, she turned around, the first thing she noticed was the thing next to the tree that I also saw. She noticed it before I had mentioned it to her, and she told me the moment she saw it, she got a feeling of panic and turned around immediately because she did not want to face it any longer. Cherry on top is that after we got back home, we called a friend of my sister to tell her the story, and she kept asking us to switch to FaceTime. When we did, we saw that said friend had been watching the movie Slenderman for over an hour. That crept the hell out of me, but of course was most likely just a coincidence, or at least so I hope. I know it sounds stupid, and I'm definitely not saying we saw Slenderman in the woods, but was the first thing I thought of when I saw that in the trees, because it looked like it. Later I told the story to some people. One friend told what happened, mentioned that we maybe just saw things because of the, hey, and that of course wouldn't be unrealistic for some people, but I do not think that was the case. Me and my sister are no lightweights. We've been for months, multiple times a week. There are weeks where we every day. We have so much tolerance. And before yesterday, I had never saw weird things while in the dark. Not in the woods, never. Our father, who we also told, said that maybe it was some teens doing something as a Halloween prank. But how did they set that up? It was bright most of the time we were standing there. And as I said, that tree was not far from us, and we would have definitely noticed any other people. I don't know what to think about this. All I know is that something like this never happened to me or us before. Both me and my sister never felt like this. This was the first time I ran out of fear. It was crazy. What's your opinion? What do you guys think? Me basically, I would be running too. I do the dash. I am not coming back to those forests. I'm never going back there. I would do dash. Woo, gone, because I cannot. No, absolutely never. Not doing it. So as I'm reading these stories, I'm realizing I don't know if I said I was gonna do 5 or 3, but it felt like I've done 5. Okay, because the first one, that was like 3 stories on its own. Okay, the second one, more reasonable, and the third one, that was a whole movie too. So I feel like it's fair for us to call it quits now. Alright, I know y'all want 2 more stories. Listen, if you really want 2 more stories, you'll tell me that in the comment section below, okay? And we'll do some more Reddit true scary stories. But other than that, okay? For now, we're just gonna call it quits because it's been a long story session here. I have no more accents I need to practice. I don't know. I was trying to do Australian at one point, it wasn't working out for me, and it got me really upset. But that's fine, okay? Because we gonna be back with another video soon. I promise. Alright? I promise. Cheers.